Ozonics Killer Wins podcast back again. Nick Simon, Cole Tanner. Nick Simon, Cole Tanner. Nick Simon, Cole Tanner.
Yep.
Ozonics Killer Wins podcast. I'm Nick Simon. You're Cole Tanner.
Nice.
Oh, I can start it over.
That's fine.
Okay.
So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about scouting in the month of June.
Yeah. Scouting month of June.
We're talking about scouting in the month of June post no trail cameras on public land as well.
Yep. You know, it sucks, but we just got to adapt. Adapt and overcome. So it's just, we're just kind of, this summer's going to look a lot different, I think, than what it did last year. So,
yeah. It's interesting for me because I think that's the one thing that's different for you and me is I remember doing this pre-cell cams.
yeah.
You know, I think this is kind of a new experience for you.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yep. And so, you know, interestingly, we actually it just kind of worked out. We actually did a big drive around last night.
Yeah.
Put JD in the back seat and went out and just did a couple big laps around a couple of the public spots that we would probably already have cams out by now on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we for sure would.
And I think that's initially right off the bat how it's going to change right off the bat.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I was going to mention this, but I'm going to mention it. We had a comment. Was it just on one of the TikTok videos?
Yeah.
And I really appreciate people commenting because it's awesome for the interaction.
Yeah.
Somebody made a comment about like, well, you're just going to have to, if you guys do enjoy the strategy and that part of it, then you're just going to have to do more of that.
Yeah.
Kind of that.
And it's going to look different. It's going to be more boots on the ground.
Yep. And that's kind of what the comment said, right?
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. It is going to look a lot different.
Yeah.
And again, it already really started. It already has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, and again, like, I hope that in our previous videos when we were explaining, I mean, I guess I'm not trying to say I should hope. It is what it is. Like, our opinion is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And am I excited about no trail cams on public land? Nope.
Absolutely not.
Nope, not at all. Again, did I scout for deer in the summertime pre-cell cams? Yep, absolutely. Do I know what to do and how to do it? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Was it, did I get a lot more done day to day with cell cams out in the woods?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep, a lot more.
Yeah, not at all.
But here we are.
Yeah.
And I think the big thing, the realization that we talked about before, and I think part of what the DNR is trying to do is and I think there is this idea that the resource will be better off in the long run.
Yeah.
The resource being the deer.
Yeah.
And they're probably right because it's just going to be harder to track them down.
Yeah,
I think there's just going to be deer that just go unseen.
Definitely. Yeah.
But again, so let's get back to it. So again, we actually did a drive around last night, like I said, went past a couple of public spots that we've hunted in the past, looking to hunt this year. And one of the things that I'll say that in years past, what I used to do, and when it's the beginning of June, especially first half of June, you know, they always say corn's knee high by the 4th of July. I feel like it's usually knee high by the 4th of June now. It seems like even right now it's ankle high, shin high.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but again, the month of June, the nice thing generally is the corn isn't going to be so tall that you can't see the deer.
Yeah.
You know, you can get out there right now and you can see across all the fields. And that is really nice.
Yeah.
So the other thing I think is, in my experience, even with the depredation hunting that I do in the summertime, what I feel like I see and what I've seen in the past just in velvet scouting and years when I couldn't use cell cams and I was just really spending the time on the road was you generally, once you get past the month of June where you're going to see bucks, obviously where you're going to see them, you're not going to see them in the corn because it's too tall.
Yeah.
But even when I dep hunt in the summer, it seems like what you see is you see a lot of deer coming out of the corn where they were bedding into the bean fields.
Yeah, exactly.
The lush green leafed bean fields, and they're just chomping on those beans.
Yeah. Could be a nice alfalfa field too.
Absolutely. Any type of ryegrass, alfalfa field, it just seems like they come into that a lot more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it seemed like last summer I saw a lot more in alfalfa fields than bean fields, it felt like.
Okay.
But I think it's just
what's around.
yeah, exactly, and it's just it could even be dependent on the deer too, really.
Yep.
You know.
So the idea is like you said, in years past, what I've done, and we just kind of did it last night, is just really trying to get out in the month of June and cover some country. Because again, you can see a lot more.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cornfields that in another 3 or 4 weeks, by middle of July, you aren't going to be able to see anything.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to be able to see out across the landscape.
Yeah.
And also be able to see kind of in little nooks and crannies and corners of fields that will be covered up by a cornfield that you just can't see.
Yeah.
And so we really just covered some ground last night. What did we see? 60 some deer.
Yeah, like 62 or something.
We probably picked you up at like 7:40. We got on the road by like a little after 8.
Yes.
It's dark by like 9:15, 9:30. And so, yeah, we saw a whole pile of deer. We saw a strutting tom in June.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's frustrating. It's cool to see him, but it's a little disheartening
Yeah.
because you're just like, I wish it was still turkey season.
Yeah.
We saw a snapping turtle. That was pretty cool. Jetty was all excited about that, but he wanted to go up and touch it. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. We saw a bunch of pheasants,
Yeah.
saw a raccoon,
Yeah.
but probably out of those 60 some deer, we probably saw a dozen bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were
Just dinkers.
real dinky.
Yeah. I mean, I think,
Saw one nice one.
yeah, it wasn't too terrible.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think, from a buck standpoint and an inventory standpoint, I think right now is kind of a tough time of year for that, just because obviously they're not fully grown and you don't really know, yada yada yada. But I think the one big takeaway that I had last night was one, getting a good idea of what crop rotation the farmers are on.
Yep.
I think that's really big for this time of year. You just kind of get that baseline set. Okay, this is beans, this is corn, yada, yada, yada. But also, I felt my personal mindset was like, okay, yeah, we're doing this from the road, but then it's like, I'm trying to think of spots where we could go and actually sit. I think from a scouting standpoint, that'll probably be more valuable in the long run, if actually sitting on a spot that you're going to hunt and see where they're bedding, yada, yada, yada. And then I think one of the biggest things was there was a spot that is kind of hard to
We can't see
you
it.
can't glass, but we came at it a different way.
In fact-
Actually, we drove by the spot twice on the way out and the way back. But on the way back, we kind of found a spot in the road where you could glass where we want to glass.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a really big positive for the night because it's a spot that we'll definitely be able to watch. Granted, it is a cornfield, but
But
still,
it's cornfield with grass right beside
Yeah,
it, and you could
exactly.
see the grass hillside.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, that is the nice thing about June, right? Is before everything gets too tall, and just to figure out like, oh hey, because I felt like one thing we saw around in north central Iowa, man, there was a lot of corn around,
yeah, a lot of corn.
a lot of corn.
Mm-hmm.
But we also saw some very specific bean fields that I was like, oh man, that's beans.
yeah, it's
Beans up
perfect.
against a couple pieces of timber that we would love to be able to see.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that whole field's beans. That's going to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, being able to cruise around in the month of June, and again, I feel like June is the time to just really cover some country
Yeah.
and see what you can see. Because you went out last week and we driving by some of the same fields we drove by. All of a sudden, there's 4 bucks right off the road,
Yeah.
and again, these bucks aren't going to be like all the way out.
Yeah,
and
no.
But when you see 6-inch brows,
Yeah.
you see 6-inch brows.
Yeah,
like okay,
exactly.
that's a good buck. You
Yeah.
know, when you see big, thick, massive, bases
and-
coming off,
yeah.
like like a lot of the bucks we saw last night were pretty spindly.
Yeah, very spindly.
Yeah, I mean, we saw one that looked decently wide, but he
Yeah.
wasn't like a giant.
Yeah,
but you
he
could
was-
just see he was thin. His brows look real thin.
Yeah, he was past the ears, but he had 1/2-inch brow tines.
Exactly,
and
exactly.
Super, like no mass at all. But
Yep. But yeah, that's the nice thing about June is just to cover that ground. And like you said, that was the kind of thing last night is, okay, let's just try to cover some country,
Yeah.
see what we can see.
Yeah.
And then where do we want to start trying to, as the month of June goes on and you get into July, okay, where can we hone in?
yeah, exactly.
Where can I get on this little high spot or this little high spot
Yeah.
or over here? And where can I see a bunch of ground?
Yeah, exactly.
And try to put an evening in over here, an evening in over here.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, it's funny we talk about putting in an evening. It's not like you're scouting for 7 hours. Like
No.
the best time to be out there is from 7:30 till 9:30.
Yeah.
You
And
know, so it's a couple hours.
I remember saying that to you last night. It's just so funny. Like even in the summer, you just hit a time of the night where it just feels like all of a sudden there's just deer everywhere.
I know, and that's what it
Starts
was.
out kind of slow, and then all of a sudden, boom! Holy, oh, there's a deer. There's a deer. It's
Yeah,
pretty
I mean,
cool.
we cruised past one spot, went past another, and then we cruised back to the first spot again. And when we came back to the first spot, it was right at dark,
Yeah.
and there was just deer
everywhere.
everywhere, right off the roads. We're sitting here looking at these 3 right here, and then 6 or 7 bucks ran right across the road in front
Yeah,
of us. We're
yeah.
like, well, there they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, and I think the thing that as we looked at stuff too, and that's where I think that your electric bike can really come in handy
Yeah, definitely.
on some of these public spots too, it kind of feels like there's kind of a couple pieces of gear that I think will be really valuable for you in June and July. Your electric bike, a thermocell, and a spotting scope.
Yeah, exactly.
And your binos.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
and maybe you bring, I mean, it's going to be so hot, but like maybe you bring a ghillie net, you know, that you could like cover your bike up, or you could
Yeah,
lean it
exactly.
over you, or just try to create a little cover that
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
or just kind of try to keep the bugs off you. Yeah, you might sweat to death, but
Yeah.
I'd rather sweat than get eaten alive.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
That's where thermocell comes in handy too. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that that's where I think as we get in past June and into July, then you really start honing in on, okay, I'm going to try to put some time in. I've already I know what corn's out there. I know what beans out there. I can't obviously see into the corn, but this is what I can see.
Yeah.
And then just see what you can start coming across.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And start honing in on them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like when I was at Meadows Whitetail, we did so much velvet filming, but it was never scouting really.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of just driving around trying to get some cool footage and stuff. And
Yep.
I could already tell last night that it was a completely different mindset, which
Yes.
it's good. It's cool.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing you can do too is if you can work it out, is if you have 2 people, man, then you're really in business, because
Yeah.
you can have one person, you know, sit on a couple spots,
Yeah.
and then the other guy just drive the circuit,
Yeah, exactly.
and then the next night you sit on a spot,
Yeah.
or I sit on a spot and you drive the circuit.
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you can, and the other thing that I've done too is like I've sat on a spot and then the next night I drive the circuit.
Yeah,
Because there
yeah,
is
yeah.
something to be said. Like it's great to look over one spot, but then I also go, well, man, if I could look over each spot
Yeah,
for a shorter
exactly.
amount of time,
Yeah.
or right at dark, if I can cover a couple spots,
Yeah.
you know, there's something to be said for that too.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You know, so, but yeah, like I said, it's just wild. The other thing that we talked a lot about, we were talking about before the podcast, and I think how this whole no camera thing is going to change public land hunting for us as well is it's interesting because you'll hear me talk a lot about with an ozonics or pre-ozonics, a lot of guys hunt the quote unquote right way.
Yeah.
They hunt the right day on the right wind on the right stand.
Yeah.
Or however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And they hunt the right way. And I feel like with an ozonics, that's allowed me to not only hunt the right way, but hunt right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You follow me?
Yep.
But I think that with this change of no cameras and just not being able to inventory and see what's out there and kind of know, it's funny because we're going back to the way it was for me
Yeah.
before. And it really before was about the right day on the right wind on the right stand.
Yeah.
That's really what it boiled down
Yeah.
to. And I think that for a lot of these spots, I think we will hunt them more conservatively than we have in the past.
Yeah, especially in October and
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep.
I mean,
The
like
first-
we always say, it gets to a certain point where you just have to go hunt.
Yes,
you know?
yes. But again, if you kind of looked at the season broken down into, let's just call it the October lull,
Mm-hmm.
the 1st through the 20th.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the pre-rut from like, let's say the 25th or the 20th through the 31st or the 20th through the November 2nd, 3rd.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the rut,
Mm-hmm.
you know, November on, and then the post-rut, November 20th till the end of the season. I feel like during the October lull, we will probably stay out of spots.
Yeah.
Unless, which it just doesn't seem like it's that possible right now, looking at what we're looking at, to be able to see a deer coming into a bean field
Yeah.
or,
consistently.
Because we just don't have cameras to say, oh, he's walking out there every single day.
Yeah.
And so it just feels like the juice isn't worth the squeeze to go into spots in October.
Yeah.
Early October especially.
Yeah.
But I think it will put more emphasis on hunting the right day on the right wind on the right stand.
Yeah.
And I always used to say it, the right stand, the right wind, the right day, or however. And when you even think about those three things, I think you have to prioritize. Is it about which one's number 1, 2, and 3? Is it, I think when you really think about it, I think the right day is probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like if we get and then I think it goes by the right wind, and then I think it's the right stand.
Yeah.
Meaning, do you have the stand in the right spot?
Yeah.
Do you have the right wind? And is it the right day? Is it the right temperature? Is it the right time of year? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so I think it's just going to put way more emphasis on hunting the right day, and then the right wind, and then the right sand. And if we can get those things to line up, that's how I used to do it before.
Yeah.
And that would be by really, sometimes you can't get all three. Sometimes you only get one of the two or two of the two. But when you get all three, like I have friends that, I've got buddies now that, and you know who I'm talking about, that have never ran cameras, never ran cell cams. I called them and said, hey man, I would just pass this or whatever they did. They reinterpreted the law. They didn't really change it. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, I know it doesn't affect you. And he's like, dude, I'm just gonna go out there when the time's right.
Yeah.
And it's like, yep, you are. And there's a lot to be said for that. And kills good bucks.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that it'll put an emphasis on, if we get a cold front in October, jackpot, here we go.
Yep.
And then obviously when the time's right in November, it's going to be time to go.
cold time.
But the nice thing I think that what this will also do is that we still have cameras on private land.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing will be when the cameras start lighting up on private, obviously we could probably translate that onto the public.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point.
And it's like, okay,
Yep.
you know, if they were taken away all the way, then I think then you're really just, you know, it's really back to the way it was before.
Yeah.
But the fact that you could still have cameras on private, and we do have private spots that we can go, man, dude, all of a sudden these bucks are on their feet during the day. Well, they're probably on their feet during the day there too.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I think that we'll probably take a lot of stock in that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think it will just really emphasize just getting out there at the right time.
Yeah.
And then and again, like I say the right wind, not that I don't trust an Ozonics and not that I won't go in there, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it just makes it even more important to be conscious of the wind.
Yeah.
I'm still going to run my Ozonics no matter what. And I count on that.
Yeah.
But still, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I just think you just got to be every time you go in there, especially you're kind of going in there blind.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know, it just makes it trickier.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
And so, but again, you know, I said this on the previous podcast, like I used to say this before, like the deer are here, like they're here, they're there, they're out there.
Yeah.
And you know, like the 40 some bucks we got on camera at that one spot, they didn't all die.
Yeah, exactly.
And they all got a year older.
Yeah.
On a real mild winter.
Yep.
And so they got to be there.
Yeah, they're going to be there for sure.
They got to be there.
Yeah. I think the one thing that'll be interesting too is to see, which I really wish, I wish we had cameras for this, but it's like, I think it'd be really interesting to see how this year differs to last year with how much rain and water we've had this year.
Oh man, there's
you know what
so
I mean?
much water out there.
I think that'll be really, really interesting to see.
There's a spot that's like, we call it the lake lap.
Yeah.
Just going around Clear Lake, and there's a spot where there's a guy there's a guy that's got a nice little farm.
Yeah.
And he had a pond that he had dug out.
Yeah.
He had it dug out. He dug it down farther, and there was just like a little splash of water in the bottom.
Not much at all.
It was just a muddy spot,
Yeah.
basically.
Yep.
And he had a dozer that was going down in there, and you could see he had been working it
Yep.
and dug it way deeper. And this spring, it was dry.
Yeah.
Just this little bitty wet spot in the bottom.
Yep.
And on the lake lap, we drove by that, and it was
Like to the brim.
chock full.
Yeah.
It was as full as he could get.
Yeah.
He must have some sort of spillover somewhere.
Yeah.
It was full.
Yeah, it was honestly kind of cool to see.
I mean, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how full that thing was.
Yeah, it's wild.
And that's full in a couple months. I mean, just like boom.
Yeah.
I mean, even on Clear Lake, I mean, I know this has nothing to do with anything, but a lot of the docks got put in earlier because we had such a mild spring, and they got put in when the lake was lower.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of docks that, I mean,
like
they're
almost getting.
they're inches from the docks.
Yeah.
They're not like where you can dangle your feet. If you dangle your feet, the water's past your ankles.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I mean, it's not dangling feet.
No.
Yeah, it looks just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, and when we drive out around, I mean, this is tall grass prairie pothole country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And in the potholes, there is a lot of water. Even when you drive along the road, there's just a lot of marshes around.
Yeah.
And you can see the water
Yeah.
standing in those. I mean, it is,
Yeah.
everything is full.
Yeah. It almost makes you think like, we talk about hunting marshes and stuff like that. This is going to be probably a great year to really key in on high dry spots.
Yeah.
If the water stays up like this, which I'm assuming just with the year we're having, it probably will. But
Well, it's the crazy thing too is like when you look at I mean, we just keep getting rain.
yeah, it's just
I mean,
nonstop.
yeah, we just
Literally.
keep getting rain. And,
Yeah, and it's not like
and the other thing about it too is you talk about not only just the water falling out of the sky, but the water in the ground.
yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of water in the ground right now.
I just keep thinking about what it would look like right now if we had a severe winter kind of and had a bunch of snow.
Yeah,
Man, that would be crazy.
I know.
But
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it'll be really, it's going to be interesting to see how this whole summer and how this fall pans out.
yeah,
Because like we talked about, I think before the podcast, a couple nights ago when you drove around and all of a sudden you call me and you're like, dude, I just saw a couple giants.
yeah,
That will happen, right? And just doing these driving arounds, all of a sudden you're going to come up on a field and you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, there he is.
yeah, yeah,
And then you start kind of honing in
yeah,
and going, okay, I saw him here, looking at the maps. What can I do?
yeah,
How can I take a look at this? How can I try to see him again?
yeah, exactly.
And then you start putting in the time.
yeah, yep,
And again, like you said, cellular trail cameras eliminated this part of it.
yeah, yeah, yep,
And we're having to go back to it.
yeah,
Is it frustrating? Yeah, because on one side of the fence, you don't have to worry about it. And on one side of the fence, you do.
yeah,
So I think that's where it's kind of like,
yeah,
gosh, it seems kind of silly.
yeah,
And I said this, and again, to play devil's advocate to all this, I said this before the podcast, is it all worth it? Man, I hope so.
yeah,
But like, again, we're so close and not very far removed to being able to use cell cams on public. So it's like when you sit here and I got home and I'm like, well, we just drove around for 2 hours. I just used a
bunch of gas.
quarter tank of gas,
Yeah,
put 100 some miles on my truck. Like, was it all worth it? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
No, 100%.
it's like, so is this what we're going to have to do now? Or do you just not do it at all?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I'd be really interested to know are there thousands of bow hunters like us out there right now that are like, well, I guess we're driving around 4 days a week.
yeah, yeah,
Or are they just going, we're just not going to do it at all. And
Yeah.
we're just not going to inventory deer and just
go hunt.
go hunt and
Yeah.
just know that they're there.
Yeah.
Or are they putting up cameras anyway? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
100%. I
like,
bet you there's a lot of people that are doing
I mean, there's probably people that are probably just going to do that and go, well, I don't know. I mean, that's not what we're going to do.
No.
Like we're just,
No.
I mean, it
absolutely not.
sucks, but
Yeah.
the law, it is what it is. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
As hard as it is to say, I mean, I am really, really bummed out about it, but I think I just keep trying to think of the positives. And I think the one positive is that probably come out a better hunter, just you're going to have to, learn spots more off the cuff. And I think that will be good from a hunter standpoint, but
Yep.
it still is just tough because we can't hunt every single day. And so when we finally had a day that we could go hunt, it's like you can really use those cameras to make a better decision. So, but
probably sell a lot more spotting scopes too.
yeah, probably.
Because that was the one thing that we grabbed last night was my spotting scope.
Yeah.
And the window mount. And it's like, okay, let's
Yeah.
get out there and there was one time where it worked to use it.
Yeah, it worked really good too.
Yep.
That was awesome.
Yep.
That was probably the biggest buck we saw too.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. But yeah, it's interesting. But even like that was one thing last night too that I noticed, and it's like that. I think it's like this everywhere. Here in North Iowa, it's so open, and it's just you can just see for miles. You know what I mean? And it's hard to kind of hide.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But you drive down the road, and if you just drive by and you don't stop, the deer kind of stand there. But man, if you crawl to a stop,
They do not like it.
they are gondy.
Yeah.
If they're within a couple hundred yards of the road, they are gondy.
Yeah.
Now, those deer that we kind of saw way out in the middle of the field, we could stop and clamp on the spotting scope
exactly.
and dial it in and go, oh, okay, that's what that guy is.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, there's a doe behind him. I didn't see that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's that's the thing. I think we found a couple of those spots where we can go, but they still don't stand for it.
No.
Yeah, they were Oscar Mike. And the one thing I'll say, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's kind of what we were talking about last year too. Like when I was in Midwest Whitetail, where we were at, it's a lot more topography, more timber, and stuff like that. So, from a velvet scouting, filming standpoint, you could kind of
Sneak.
strategically
Yeah.
pull up to a spot a little bit easier and stuff. So it is a lot more challenging.
Or just
here.
sneak up over just the top of a hill.
Yeah, exactly.
And look onto a field before you drive over
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yep.
One thing I was kind of surprised by last night, though, is, and again, doesn't mean they're not there because a lot of times those fawns, they're really small right now. We saw a fawn last week. Jet and I were driving around, and we were driving around the lake, right around Clear Lake. I don't mind saying where it was. There's a Baptist church camp that's on like kind of the northwest side of Clear Lake, I guess you'd say. And we were just driving kind of slow. I had all the windows down, and I actually heard the fawn.
Yeah.
Yep, I heard the fawn. And I told Jed, I said, that was a fawn. So we drove up, turned back around, came back by, and sure enough, I went by real slow and I saw the doe. And so we stopped and we just kind of got out and we're kind of looking. The doe bounded off, which a lot of times those does will do. They try to, pull the predator or the person or whatever, coyote away.
Yeah.
And the fawn will usually just lay right down and just wait.
Yeah.
Well, we saw the fawn actually kind of run into this like real thick brush pile, and she was little.
Yeah.
So, but with that said, I would have thought last night of all those does we saw, we would have saw a fawn somewhere.
Yeah.
But we didn't see a single fawn.
Not a single one.
Not a single fawn.
Yeah, we saw so many does.
We saw a lot of does, and we saw a lot of does in short corn and short like beans that were like an inch off the ground, and not a fawn.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I really thought we'd get to see at least one or two.
Yeah, I saw one last Friday night too.
Okay.
Around Clear Lake again.
Okay.
But yeah, I was honestly thinking that too. It's like you'd think. I mean, I bet you. I mean, we saw probably a dozen bucks. So I mean, we're seeing, 40, 50 does.
Yeah.
And not a single.
Yeah, not a single
fawn.
not a single fawny in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're there. I mean, there's maybe nothing to that.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe there is.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff that we see too. I mean, we see them out in fields and stuff like that, but it is kind of a lot of tall grass, like you said, tall grass prairie and stuff. So they could just be right there, but still.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And like you said, there was always, and I think for everybody, they feel that, it's a heck of an accomplishment to kill a whitetail buck. It's a real heck of an accomplishment to kill a whitetail buck on public ground.
Yeah.
Did hunting on public ground get harder? I don't know if it got harder. It definitely changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing you could say too is that I guess from some perspectives, I guess you could say it's leveled the playing field a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd say
because cell cams aren't free.
Yeah.
And the plans aren't free.
Yeah.
And some people just can't justify it or don't want to buy them or can't afford them or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. And again, it's going to be, I think the theme for this year, especially on public land, is going to be the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Definitely.
And I think sometimes you just think of just the season. And I think there is a lot of truth in the harder you work, the luckier you get, and the more seat time you can put in the woods during the fall, the better
Yeah.
off you're going to be
Yeah.
to a certain point.
Yeah.
Because if you're sitting in the same tree stand on October 1st and then November 1st and December 1st,
Yeah.
and you just hunt the same spot every single day, you're probably wearing it out.
Yeah. Doing
But
more bad than good.
Yep. So there's diminishing return at some point. But I think that the harder you work, the luckier you get during the summer is going to do you a lot of good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I'll tell you what the interesting thing too, as we're having this discussion is, you know, it is kind of funny how like a lot of guys, and me included, I just kind of stopped doing this. I stopped driving around
Yeah.
because I was like, well, I'm just going to put my cams where I can't see and where I know these deer are
Yeah.
hopefully during it or where they might be in the summertime. But do you think about if you would have been driving around and doing this plus cell cams,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's funny because like I drove around a ton last summer, but it was never with a scouting mindset.
Yeah.
It was just to go try and film.
Yeah, just try to
cool
get
stuff.
some cool pictures,
Yeah.
get some cool
I mean,
video.
I was going to places that we didn't even think about hunting, and I was just up there just trying to film stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think that's going to be the thing that's going to one thing that we're going to be doing here shortly is we're going to be putting out on some of our private spots.
Mm-hmm.
We're resetting our cell cams on the private spots, and we're going to be putting out some trophy rock
yeah.
to just try to kind of hone them in a little bit,
Yeah.
just to see what's out there.
Yeah.
And we were hoping to put trail cams on public land and just see the difference.
Yeah.
But we won't be able to do that part.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, it will be really, really interesting to see like how it's going to change the fall. It'll be really interesting to see. I don't even know if the state does anything like this because they don't ask. They just ask the county. They don't ask if it was on private or public when you do your harvest registration.
Oh yeah.
They just ask
Right.
the county. That would be a really cool question to ask.
Yeah.
Like
How
was it
many
on?
were actually harvested on?
Yeah, well, like even just if you say if it was on private, if it was on leased, if it was on public.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess those would be the three, right?
Mm-hmm.
Private,
I guess you could
Leased.
you could maybe put
public.
permission in there, maybe.
Yeah. A permission, your own ground,
Yeah.
leased, public,
Yeah.
or like hunting with an outfitter.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Those 5 would be really interesting to know.
Yeah.
Like,
Where those numbers go.
and they wouldn't have it from previous years.
Right.
But it would be interesting to set a baseline.
Yeah. Definitely.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, moral of the story is if you're listening to this and again, it's June, get out there, do some driving. If you're hunting public ground, it's not the end of the world that you can't use cell cams. Again,
No.
I did it for a long time before cell cams and it was fine. You know what I mean? I think there is different trains of thought. There's a train of thought of, I think what you're kind of going to be doing, which is going to be trying to spend a lot of time on the road and a lot of time looking out the window.
Yeah.
And then the other train of thought is the deer are there.
Yeah.
And so you're just going to have to be more careful and conscious and much more aware of when you go in there and how you go in there,
Definitely.
which is a lot of what you were doing before, but you kind of had a little bit of a leg up knowing what was there.
Yeah.
Now, not knowing what's there, I think it emphasizes
Yeah.
making sure that you try to go in when you can put as many of the cards in your favor.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
You just have to really try to stack the deck
Yeah.
with the right day on the right wind on the right stand.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you still just go hunt.
Right.
And at a certain point, you never know, what may walk by.
Yeah.
But I think it's just going to really emphasize those things. That's what it's going to do for me, from my perspective.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Definitely.
Like on a couple of these spots where we hunted early in October because we had cell cams and we knew does were walking by, man, I don't know if I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
One, because I don't know the does are walking by, and two, because knowing that I'm not going to have the intel later in the fall of when the bucks are on their feet during the day.
Exactly.
I'm not going to try to. I feel like I wouldn't want to go in there and put extra pressure.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's a little bit of an oxymoron because it's public ground and anybody else could do it.
Yeah.
But you know what
Still,
I'm saying?
though.
Hunting secluded spots, hunting spots that I think are very much overlooked where we don't see a lot of other hunting pressure,
Yeah.
makes me feel like I would now just wait
Yeah.
and stay out of there until it's the right time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then
move in.
then put my chips in and go, okay, let's play.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Yep. No, it's gonna be fun.
Yep.
I'm still got the same level of excitement. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what, I think, and again, I'm not a deer biologist, and this is just my own hunch here, but I would think, if you looked at after January 10th of last year till January 10th of this year, I would think that this year the state of Iowa would have a bumper crop of antler growth and deer that made it through.
Gosh, you'd think.
Because, man, if a deer died in this winter, it grew up in the wrong state. I mean, it's just like this.
Yeah.
I mean, if a deer died this winter, it just didn't have.
Yeah.
Didn't have any hair. I don't know, because it's just like, I mean,
No,
we had the mildest winter
Yeah.
all across the state. I mean, we had a mild winter.
Yeah.
You know, we just had such a mild winter, and now we've had
Really good rain.
good rain, and everything is just lush green, and
Yeah.
you know, it's just, you would think that it's all setting up for, and it's not that EHD and CWD and stuff isn't out there,
Exactly.
but
Still.
still, it just feels like we've had a lot of rain and we had a mild winter, and you would think that everything is very conducive to bucks growing antlers.
Yeah.
And maybe a guy listening to this that knows the difference is like, what would rain have to do with it? But I would think when the rain helps
Better
the grass grow,
nutrients.
there's all this,
Yeah.
there's just more out there.
Yeah.
It's just, and a mild winter, there's just nothing getting killed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And it's not like probably those big bucks but again, they're probably making it through anyway. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
I just think that, I think that this year is going to be a big year,
Yeah.
you know?
I hope so, man.
Yeah.
Gosh, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap it up.
Yep.
Another podcast in the books. Thanks for listening. Ozonics Killer Wins podcast. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
If you want to get out there, get out there.
See you next week.
Stay classy.